When I was 15, I told my boyfriend, Brian Begali, that if he got an A on the next algebra test, I would do whatever he wanted. I could tell from the facial expression that followed that maybe it wasn't that intelligent of a comment to have made, or perhaps I should have been a little bit more specific by the phrase, whatever you want, but it was out there, the deed was done. We were both taking Mr. Winkle's algebra class that semester. Mr. Winkles was terrible. Nobody liked Mr. Winkles. He was mean, strict, and boring. He was very uptight and always scowling, and he would walk around with a ruler, and when you had an incorrect answer, he would slap it on the desk and say no. Now, this was a couple years past the hand-slapping phase in school, but it was still shocking and terrifying nonetheless. The worst thing about Mr. Winkles is that when you got your test back in class, he would announce your grade to everyone, introducing us very early on to the power of public humiliation. Dean Pelkey, B-. Sean Mulder, A+. Brian Begali, D. Brian never studied algebra. He never studied anything. He got D's and F's in all of his classes. Now, I know Brian was smart. I tried to get him to study, but he would just laugh and say, "What's the point?" He would arrive late for class, plop himself down into the seats, make some jokes, look around. "So what are we doing today?" Everybody would say, "We're having a test." He would say, "Bring it on." It was quite amazing. I still wish I had that attitude when I came to school and assignments and everything. So Brian was one of those people that you just really wanted to try to control and dominate to a certain extent, but I was not the dominant one in this relationship at all. You see, Brian was cool. He was popular. I was not. But Brian was cool. He wasn't cool and popular in a jock, muscly, pretty boy kind of way. He was popular in a mysterious, dangerous kind of way. He was popular in a not good grades kind of way. He was half Panamanian, which made him very exotic for small-town Grand Haven, Michigan. He rode a motorcycle. He lived in an apartment with another high school guy and not with his parents. He had thick black hair and a big, beautiful smile. He wanted me to break the rules. I was totally in love with him. But was I in love with him enough to do whatever he wanted? And I thought, well, maybe he wants me to clean his apartment, which was pretty disgusting, as you can imagine, 2 high school guys. Or maybe he'd want me to cook him 3 amazing, elaborate meals for a week, and then feed him grapes. Well, all men like that, right? But I really did know what he wanted. I mean, I was 15 and he was 17. We had been dating for 6 months, and I was a virgin. I was a stubborn, steadfast virgin. Sex and sex, just the simple act of sex, was the ultimate transgression. If I knew then what I have been hearing tonight, I mean, this was the 80s. This was late 80s. There was no such thing as 50 Shades of Grey. There was no cable TV. There was no internet. There was no Beyonce or Shakira. Salsa dancing was not in yet, which means there were no public displays of hip action at all, whatsoever. The sauciest thing we had available for us was Judy Blume's book, Forever. You all know that book. It was off the banned books list at that point, but it was still one of those books that you hid from your mother on your bookshelf. We had Charlie's Angels, the original, so we had maybe 1 hip. We had Starsky and Hutch, that was pretty sexy. But for the most part, this was a different era altogether. So for the next 2 weeks, Brian studied every day. Every day. He carried his algebra book around with him wherever he went, studied in between classes. He had his more studious friend, Steve Harden, tutor him. And he started taunting me. "You'll never guess what I'm going to ask you to do. I can't wait for Mr. Winkle's algebra test." So I was getting pretty nervous at this point. In fact, I was freaking out. What would I do if Brian got an A on his algebra test? Could I follow through? Could I do it? Brian was never going to get an A on his algebra test. We took the test on a Monday. Brian sat down, none of his usual flippant jokes. He just plopped right down and studied his notes all up to the moment when Mr. Winkles told us to put all of our materials away, except for the number 2 pencil. I could not concentrate on my test at all. I was just listening to Brian's pencil go the entire time. At the end of the test, we got up. Brian slaps me on the ass as I walk out the door in front of Mr. Winkles and struts down the hallway. For the next 2 weeks, I'm getting this. All he has to do is this. Doesn't have to say anything. For 5 excruciating days, we wait for the results. On Friday, we walk into the classroom and sit down, and there's an unusual silence and tension in the room because by this point, everybody in the class knows exactly what's at stake. In fact, everybody in the entire school knows what this grade means to both Brian and to me. So Mr. Winkle stands up and begins his ritual of humiliation. And it's at this moment that it dawns on me that I have lost control of the situation. I no longer have control. I am no longer dominant for these 2 weeks of my relationship. In fact, the power of my sexual future is now in the hands of Mr. Winkles. Dean Pelkey, B-. Sean Mulder, A-. Brian Begali. I swear, it was like 10 minutes. The pause went on and on and on. Why wasn't he saying Brian's grade? I had beads of sweat going down my temples and down my neck and down my back as I waited for the grade. And I looked up at Mr. Winkles, and he was peering down his glasses at Brian, and Brian was looking up on the edge of his seat. And I could have sworn in that moment that I saw Mr. Winkles smile just a little bit when he said Brian's grade. B+. As I lifted my head to thank God, I heard Brian plunk his head down on the desk in defeat. Afterwards, he pleaded me, he begged me, he said I should give him the prize anyway because he had been 3 points away from an A. He asked Mr. Winkles if he could do extra credit, mow his lawn, anything to up his grade. And then he said to me, you know, I should get a second prize at least. And when that didn't work, he begged me for another chance. My offer should still be good, he said. He should give me one more chance to get an A on the next algebra test. I was like, yeah, right, like I'm gonna do that. Should I do that? No, I'm not going to do that. No way, no way. So, you know, years later, I think about Brian. I wonder where he is. I wonder how he's doing. And I wonder what would have happened differently in our lives for both Brian and for myself if I had given him one more chance to get an A. Thank you.